All right, let's get right into it. A total diplomatic breakdown in Geneva has pushed the United States and Iran right to the edge. You've got military forces moving into position, you've got red lines being crossed. We're going to break down exactly how this whole thing reached a boiling point. So this is where it all becomes very, very real. 240 kilometers. That's how close a U.S. carrier strike group, the USS Abraham Lincoln, is sitting to the coast of Iran. Now you have to understand, in military terms, that's not just sitting back and looking tough. That is point-blank range. That's an attack posture.
And what kind of firepower are we talking about at that range? Well, the U.S. forces parked in the region can launch 800 combat sorties. That's 800 strikes every single day. I mean, that is an unbelievable amount of force, the kind that could systematically take apart an entire country's military infrastructure in just a few weeks.
And if you're wondering about the timeline, well, it's shockingly tight. Senator Lindsey Graham, who had just been briefed on all this, said a decision on military action isn't some far-off possibility. We're talking weeks, not months. This isn't just speculation. It's a reflection of a situation where diplomacy has officially run out of road. So, how did we get here?
Well, it all boils down to a complete and total collapse in talks over 4 demands the U.S. considered non-negotiable. These are the red lines that, according to the sources, Iran just flat-out rejected, and that rejection is what led directly to this military standoff we're seeing right now.
Now, you really have to pay attention to the language here. When a top official like Vice President JD Vance says Iran is not yet willing to acknowledge the demands, that's diplomatic code. What he's really saying is that Iran completely rejected the entire American framework for a deal. It's the official confirmation that, yep, diplomacy has failed.
So what were these red lines, exactly? The source material lays them out, and they happen to align with what's been called Netanyahu's 4 demands. First, 0 uranium enrichment capability, none, and unlimited inspections. Second, real, serious limits on their ballistic missile program, the ones that can threaten Israel and U.S. bases. Third, they had to dismantle their entire network of proxies, groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. And finally, any concessions had to be simultaneous and reciprocal. No getting sanctions relief before doing anything.
And this table? Wow. It just lays the whole deadlock bare. At the Geneva talks, Iran's response was a hard no across the board. They refused to even talk about missiles and proxies, saying that's got nothing to do with the nuclear program. They demanded sanctions get lifted before they'd even consider any nuclear limits, the complete opposite of what the U.S. wanted. And on the core issues, enrichment and inspections, again, nope. It was a comprehensive rejection.
And just when it seemed like diplomacy was officially dead, a new, extremely powerful player stepped onto the field and basically changed the entire strategic calculation: Russia. They started actively siding with Iran, and suddenly, this wasn't just a regional standoff anymore. It was becoming a potential great power confrontation.
And how did Russia get involved? With an offer that was both incredibly smart and incredibly dangerous. Moscow said it would be willing to take and store Iran's enriched uranium. This creates what analysts are now calling a strategic escape route, and it's a massive wrench in America's plan to use pressure.
Okay, so here's how this escape route would work. Picture this. Iran enriches its uranium. Then, right before they think a U.S. strike is coming, they ship all that critical material to Russia for safekeeping. The U.S. bombs then destroy Iran's facilities, but the most important part, the actual weapons-grade uranium, is completely safe, sitting in Russia, totally out of America's reach, just waiting to be returned years down the road.
And you've got to understand, Russia's support isn't just talk. It's happening on 2 fronts. You've got the diplomatic cover with the uranium offer, which makes Iran much less likely to give in to U.S. demands. But at the same time, you've got Russian warships conducting joint military exercises with Iran, potentially in the exact same waters as the American fleet. That creates a massive, massive risk of an accidental clash between 2 nuclear superpowers.
So, with Russia providing the strategic backstop and Iran refusing to give an inch, the focus just snaps right back to the military reality on the ground. The U.S. now has to weigh this new, very complicated geopolitical situation against the raw, overwhelming power it has sitting just off Iran's coast.
So what's the thinking in Washington? Well, according to the sources, the assessment is that Russia's support is a huge political problem for the long game. But in the short term, militarily, it's basically irrelevant. The Russian forces in the area are seen as a token presence. A single warship can't do anything to stop 800 strikes a day from a U.S. carrier, which would probably destroy that Russian vessel in the first few hours of any conflict anyway. And that brings us to this final, crucial point from VP Vance. When he confirms that Iran rejected the Redlines and then immediately adds that the administration has many tools to stop them, he is making one thing crystal clear. Diplomacy, one of those tools, has failed. The main tool being readied now is military force.
So all of this leaves us with a pretty sobering final question. You have Iran rejecting the entire U.S. framework. You have Russia providing a strategic escape route that makes sanctions and pressure less effective. And you have a massive American fleet positioned for a sustained assault. With every other option seemingly exhausted, you have to wonder if the path to military action is not just possible, but at this point, maybe even inevitable.